What if the worst thing that ever happened to you was shared across the world before anyone could stop it? What if your family found out you were gone from social media? Tonight, we uncover how one crime went viral and why the world could never look away. Watch until the end to see how this case changed the internet forever. A 17-year-old girl, a brutal crime, and images so disturbing they didn't just stay local, they spread across the entire internet. This is the story of Bianca Devins, a teenager whose murder went viral. But this story isn't just about a crime. It's about obsession, control, and the dangerous way. Viewer discretion is advised. This documentary covers sensitive and disturbing events. We will not display graphic images, but we will speak honestly about what happened. We tell this story with respect for Bianca, her family, and her memory. On the night of July 13, 2019, Bianca Devins was like any other teenager going out for the weekend. She was just 17 years old, living in Utica, New York. That evening, she attended a Nicole Dollanganger concert in Queens with 21-year-old Brandon Clark, a man she had known for only a few months. Bianca was excited about the show, music, friends, and a sense of freedom that most teenagers crave. But what should have been a normal night out ended in tragedy. By the early hours of July 14th, she was dead. What makes this case different from so many others is not just the brutality of the act, but what happened next. Her killer broadcast his crime across the internet, and images of Bianca's murder spread faster than the police could even notify her family. This wasn't just a tragedy, it was a digital nightmare. To understand this story, we need to know who Bianca was. To her family and friends, Bianca Devins was much more than the girl the internet would come to know. She was a daughter, a sister, a creative soul with dreams of studying psychology. She was artistic, thoughtful, and like so many teens her age, she spent a lot of her time online. Bianca became part of a growing internet culture, often referred to as the e-girl aesthetic. She built a modest following on platforms like Instagram, Discord, and Tumblr, where she shared her fashion, her thoughts, and her art. To her fans, she was unique and expressive. But to her loved ones, she was simply Bianca, sweet, caring, and deeply loved. Enter Brandon Clark. At 21 years old, Clark was older than Bianca and had met her online. Their relationship was complicated. To Bianca, Clark was a friend, someone she spent time with, but not someone she saw romantically. To Clark, however, Bianca represented something more. His fascination grew into infatuation. And soon, infatuation became obsession. On July 13th, Bianca and Clark went to that concert together. Witnesses later reported that during the show, Bianca kissed another friend. For Clark, that moment became a breaking point. Hours later, while driving Bianca back home, he would murder her in his car, slashing her throat in a jealous rage. After the concert, Bianca and Brandon Clark drove back toward Utica. What exactly happened in the car remains partly unknown, but investigators believe Clark confronted Bianca about the kiss at the show. Arguments escalated, and then, in a sudden, irreversible act, Clark took out a knife and attacked Bianca. Bianca died in that car before she could even make it home. She was just 17 years old. But what Clark did next was something no one was prepared for. He pulled out his phone. He took photographs of Bianca's body, and he uploaded them to the internet. Within minutes, images of Bianca's murder began circulating on Discord, Snapchat, and Instagram. Clark posted captions alongside the pictures, some mocking, some filled with self-pity. On Discord, he wrote, "Sorry, fuckers, you're going to have to find someone else to orbit." On Instagram, he uploaded a photo of Bianca's body with the chilling caption, "Here comes hell. It's redemption, right?" This wasn't just a crime. It was a performance. And the stage was the internet. Bianca's family did not hear the news from police first. They saw it online. Her younger sister, Olivia, received the images through private messages before officers had a chance to knock on their door. Friends were tagged in the pictures. Strangers reshared them for shock value. The images spread like wildfire, faster than anyone could control. For Bianca's mother, Kim Devins, the grief of losing her daughter was made infinitely worse by the knowledge that thousands, if not millions, were viewing those horrific photos. This was not just murder. It was digital cruelty. Some called it psychological terrorism, and that description was not an exaggeration. Meanwhile, as the images spread online, police in Utica received a frantic 911 call. On the other end was Brandon Clark. He confessed to the murder and threatened to livestream his own suicide. When officers arrived, they found Clark near his car. He stabbed himself in the neck, live-streaming the act for his online followers. Police rushed to stop him, applying pressure to his wound and taking him into custody. Inside the vehicle, they discovered Bianca's body. And here's where this story takes a disturbing turn, because what happened after Bianca's death might be even more shocking than the crime itself. As her killer sat in custody, her family was being terrorized by strangers, and the images were spreading faster than anyone could stop them. Stay with us, because what you're about to see next will change the way you think about social media forever. Even after Clark was in custody, the images of Bianca's death continued to spread. Platforms like Instagram, Facebook, and Discord scrambled to delete them, but every time one account was shut down, another appeared. Copies of the photos resurfaced on Twitter, 4chan, and anonymous message boards. It seemed unstoppable. Bianca's family begged the platforms to do more, but the internet had already done its damage. Social media companies faced heavy criticism for being too slow and too careless. The world began asking a new question. When violence goes viral, who is responsible? The killer? The people who share it? Or the platforms that host it? For investigators, the physical crime was over. Clark was behind bars. But for Bianca's family, the nightmare was only beginning. The question remained, why did this happen? And what drove Brandon Clark to turn an act of murder into a public spectacle? To understand the motive behind this crime, we need to look deeper, beyond the night of the concert, beyond the argument in the car, and into the mind of Brandon Clark. From the very beginning, Clark's relationship with Bianca was built on an uneven foundation. Bianca was 17, still finding her identity, still exploring friendships and online spaces. Clark, at 21, was older, more experienced, and more invested. To her, he was a friend. To him, she was something more, something he wanted to control. Friends of Bianca later said she made it clear she wasn't looking for anything serious, but Clark ignored the boundaries. He treated their friendship like a relationship, and every interaction fed his fixation. Bianca's growing online presence may have fueled his jealousy. She was liked, followed, and supported by a digital community. To Clark, that meant competition. He began to see Bianca not as a friend with her own choices, but as something he was entitled to. The concert on July 13, 2019, became a turning point. Witnesses reported Bianca kissed another friend that night. For Clark, this was a public rejection, a humiliation. His anger grew, and by the time they drove back to Utica, his thoughts had turned violent. What makes this case especially disturbing is that Clark seemed to plan his actions in advance. Investigators later found online searches and posts suggesting he was already thinking about murder and about sharing it online. This wasn't just a crime of passion. It was also a crime of performance. Experts say crimes like this are rarely about love. They are about control. Clark could not control Bianca's choices. He could not control who she kissed, who she cared for, or who she considered just a friend. So instead, he chose the one form of control left to him, taking her life. And in a twisted act of digital dominance, he decided not only to kill Bianca, but to broadcast it, to make the world watch his crime, to make sure Bianca's image was forever tied to his violence. There is another layer to this story, one that reveals something about our culture online. Clark didn't just kill Bianca. He turned her into viral content. He fed into a toxic online environment where shock value equals attention, where trolls thrive on tragedy, where violence becomes entertainment. For many, this was the most unsettling part of the case. The internet didn't just witness the crime. It multiplied it. It gave Clark the audience he wanted. And it gave trolls the chance to. The motive was clear: jealousy, obsession, control, and an addiction to online attention. But once Clark was in custody, the focus shifted. What would justice look like? And what could be done to stop something like this from happening again? Here we'll walk through Brandon Clark's trial and sentencing, the fight Bianca's family faced against the viral images, the creation of Bianca's Law, and the larger impact on society. After his failed attempt at suicide, Brandon Clark was taken into custody. The evidence against him was overwhelming. His online posts, the photographs, and his own 911 call. He was charged with second-degree murder. In February 2020, Clark pled guilty. He admitted to killing Bianca Devins. But in a bizarre twist, he later tried to withdraw his plea, claiming his lawyer had pressured him. The court rejected his request. On March 16, 2021, Brandon Clark was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. For Bianca's family, the sentencing brought some justice, but their nightmare was far from over. The images of Bianca's murder continued to circulate online. Trolls sent them directly to her mother and younger sister. Every time a platform removed them, they resurfaced somewhere else. Imagine losing your child and then watching strangers exploit that tragedy for clicks, memes, and cruel entertainment. That was the reality the Devins family faced. Out of their grief, Bianca's family began to fight back. They pushed for new legislation, what became known as Bianca's Law. This proposed law would require social media companies with more than a certain number of users to improve moderation, hire staff specifically to remove violent content, and take accountability for the spread of harmful material. The message was clear. Tragedies like Bianca's cannot be allowed to go viral unchecked. Platforms must do more than react. They must prevent. Bianca's case sparked global conversations. How do we balance free speech with safety? Should platforms be legally responsible for the violence they host? And what does it mean when a human life is reduced to viral content? For experts in digital safety, this case became an urgent warning. For parents, it was a terrifying reminder of the dangers lurking online. And for Bianca's community, it was a tragedy that demanded change. Through it all, Bianca is remembered not for her death, but for her life. She was a teenager with dreams, creativity, and love to give. Her family and friends continue to honor her memory, not as a victim, but as a daughter, a sister, and a beloved friend. Her story is a symbol of the need for awareness, for responsibility, and for compassion in the digital age. Bianca's Law may not erase what happened, but it ensures her legacy lives on. The murder of Bianca Devins was one of the first crimes to truly show us how violence can go viral. It changed her family forever. It changed the internet forever. And it forces us to ask, how do we stop this from happening again? Bianca Devins' story is more than a crime. It is a mirror reflecting the darker side of our digital age. One man's jealousy and obsession ended her life. But the internet turned that tragedy into something even larger. A viral event that traumatized her family, shocked the public, and revealed how unprepared we are for violence in the online world. This case forces us to ask difficult questions. Should social media companies be held legally responsible for allowing violent crimes to spread? Should users who share such content face consequences? And what safeguards must be put in place to ensure that no other family suffers as Bianca's did? Bianca Michelle Devins was more than a headline. She was more than a viral story. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a young woman with dreams of becoming a psychologist. Her legacy should not be defined by violence, but by the love she shared and the fight her family continues for justice and accountability. If you found this documentary important, please consider subscribing for more true crime investigations. And tell us in the comments, do you believe social media companies should be legally required to stop violent content from spreading? Your voice matters. This has been the story of Bianca Devins, her life, her death, and the lessons we must all learn from the crime that went viral. May she rest in peace. Thank you for staying with us through this difficult story. Bianca Devins' life was filled with love, creativity, and promise, and her legacy deserves to be more than just the way she died. In memory of Bianca Devins, 2001, 2019. If you thought this case was shocking, just wait until you see what's coming next. The next story I'm about to release will take everything you think you know about crime and turn it upside down. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. So hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and get ready, because the next video is about to start, and it's even darker than this one. Before we begin, let me warn you, this case is unlike anything you've ever heard. It starts with a shocking murder, but what investigators uncovered next will leave you speechless. Every twist pulls you deeper, and by the end, you'll be questioning everything you thought you knew about justice. So stay with me, because the most unbelievable part of this story is still to come. In the quiet Canadian city of Surrey, British Columbia, life moved gently, like ripples across a still pond. But on one fateful day in 2022, that calm was shattered. A young woman was found brutally murdered inside her own home, and what investigators uncovered would haunt the city forever. This is the story of a life stolen far too soon, a community plunged into fear, and an investigation that peeled back layers of obsession, secrecy, and betrayal, until the horrifying truth finally came into the light. Join me as we dive deep into the brutal Surrey murder case and uncover the shocking details most people don't even know. It began with a 911 call. A neighbor in Surrey's Guildford neighborhood reported hearing a faint crash, then silence, and then nothing. When officers arrived at the small brick apartment complex, the front door was locked. No sign of forced entry, no shattered windows. But when they forced the door open, the scene inside was horrific. The apartment was eerily quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. In the bedroom, sprawled across the floor, lay the body of a 25-year-old woman. She was surrounded by signs of a violent struggle, and yet, disturbingly, parts of the apartment appeared wiped clean. No phone, no murder weapon, no note. It was as if the killer had erased their presence and vanished into thin air. Within minutes, the street outside was swarming with police cruisers, forensics vans, and yellow crime scene tape. Neighbors stood in shock. Some cried. Others clutched their children. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in quiet, suburban Surrey. Her name was withheld initially out of respect for her family, but friends would soon speak her name in grief-filled interviews. She had grown up in Surrey, attended local schools, and was known for her warm smile, her artistic mind, and her unwavering loyalty to her friends. She worked at a local cafe while studying part-time at a community college. She dreamed of opening her own design studio one day. Those who knew her said she was the kind of person who made others feel safe, even though she, herself, had stopped feeling safe in the weeks before her death. Because in the weeks leading up to the murder, she had told a close friend, "I feel like someone's following me, like watching me." No one could have imagined how real that fear was. As news of her death spread, Surrey descended into panic. The local news ran updates every hour. Radio stations urged residents to be vigilant. On social media, #JusticeForVictimName trended locally as candlelight vigils were held in parks across the city. Parents walked their kids to school. Young women stopped going out alone at night. Landlords reported tenants breaking leases just to get away from the Guildford neighborhood. The city, normally calm, multicultural, and tight-knit, was now paralyzed by fear, because everyone was asking the same question: Who would do something like this? Detectives from the Surrey RCMP Major Crimes Unit took over immediately. They canvassed the building for witnesses, knocked on every door, checked nearby CCTV cameras. They even pulled traffic camera footage from blocks away, hoping to catch a glimpse of anyone entering or leaving the building. But at first, they found nothing. The front door had been locked from the inside. There were no fingerprints on the doorknob, no foreign DNA on the body, and no sign of forced entry. That told investigators something chilling. The victim likely knew her killer. They had been let inside willingly. Digging into her personal life revealed a complicated web. A former boyfriend, controlling, jealous, and known to show up unannounced at her work. A male friend who had recently confessed romantic feelings, which she had gently rejected. And a neighbor who had been caught staring at her apartment window late at night, though he claimed it was just coincidence. Each man became a person of interest, but with no physical evidence, police had nothing concrete to arrest anyone. Leads poured in from the public. Some claimed they saw a hooded figure outside the building at midnight. Others swore they heard shouting the night before the murder. But every tip led nowhere. The case stalled, and tensions rose. The public started questioning the RCMP's competence. The victim's family held emotional press conferences pleading for justice. Weeks turned into months, and it seemed the killer might get away with it. Then a twist. A small discovery that would blow the case wide open. During a routine evidence review, a young forensic technician decided to reprocess every object from the crime scene using a new technique. While dusting the inside latch of the victim's bedroom window, they found something overlooked before. Partial fingerprint. It was faint, barely visible, but enough to run through the national RCMP database. And the result came back with a hit. A man, 27 years old, living just 6 blocks from the victim. And he had a record, prior charges of domestic assault and harassment. Investigators immediately began surveillance on him. They found he had stopped showing up at work. He seemed paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder. And most damning of all, they pulled his phone records and discovered he had called the victim repeatedly in the weeks before her death, even though he told police he barely knew her. And here's the thing, what you've heard so far is only the surface. Because in just a moment, I'm going to reveal the twist that completely turned this entire investigation upside down. The clue everyone missed, until it was almost too late. So don't go anywhere, because the most shocking part of this story is still coming. The net was closing in. Detectives brought him in quietly, without public notice. First he was calm, even smug. He denied knowing her, denied ever being inside her apartment. But as the hours passed, cracks began to show. Police showed him the fingerprint. He claimed it was a mistake. They showed him gas station security footage, him buying bleach and cleaning supplies late at night, just hours after the estimated time of death. He claimed it was coincidence, but the evidence piled up, and the pressure mounted. After 3 grueling days of interrogation, he broke. I didn't mean to, I lost control. He confessed everything. He admitted he had dated the victim briefly months earlier, but after she ended things, he became obsessed. He would watch her from the parking lot, follow her to work. On the night of the murder, he let himself in through her unlocked balcony door, waited for her to return home and confronted her. They argued. She demanded he leave, and in a violent outburst, he attacked her, killing her. Then he spent hours cleaning the scene before locking the door behind him and slipping away into the night, believing he had erased every trace. He was wrong. After the confession, the suspect was formally arrested and charged with second-degree murder. News of the arrest hit Surrey like a thunderclap. Local reporters swarmed the RCMP detachment. Neighbors who had once walked past this man on their way to work now stared at his photograph on every TV screen in shock. He had seemed so ordinary, quiet, polite, a ghost in plain sight, and yet, behind closed doors, he had been plotting and stalking and spiraling. The RCMP held a press conference confirming the breakthrough. An officer stepped up to the microphones and said, This was a calculated, violent act. We want the public to know our officers never stopped working. This arrest is a result of relentless dedication. For the victim's family, it was the first real glimmer of hope since their lives had been shattered. But the road to justice was far from over. The trial opened at the British Columbia Supreme Court nearly a year after the murder. Security was heavy. The gallery was packed. Family members, journalists, and curious locals who wanted to see the man accused of tearing their community apart. The prosecution laid out a chilling case. The defendant had a documented history of obsessive behavior. He had harassed and stalked the victim for months. He had planned the confrontation, bringing supplies to clean the scene. And he had lied repeatedly during questioning until the evidence forced his hand. They presented his confession, a recording played for the court, where his voice trembled as he admitted everything. They showed the fingerprint, the phone records, and the gas station footage. The defense tried to argue he had acted in a moment of passion, not premeditation. They claimed it was a crime of sudden rage, not calculated intent. But the jury was unmoved. Every day, the victim's family sat in the front row, silent, tearful, clutching each other's hands. Her mother wore her daughter's favorite silver necklace, as if keeping her spirit present in the courtroom. After 3 weeks of testimony and 6 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The courtroom fell silent. No one moved. The air was electric. The foreperson stood and read the verdict. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder. Gasps, sobs, tears of relief. The victim's mother buried her face in her hands. Her father wrapped his arms around her, both trembling. The judge sentenced the killer to life in prison with no chance of parole for 15 years. He showed no emotion as he was led away in handcuffs. For the first time in nearly 2 years, the victim's family could exhale. Justice, at least in part, had been served. The verdict sent shockwaves through Surrey. Outside the courthouse, crowds cheered as the news spread. Posters of the victim's smiling face were held high like banners of victory. Reporters spoke of closure, but the community knew closure was impossible. She was gone. Nothing could change that. But there was something powerful in knowing that her story had been heard, that her life mattered, and that the man who stole it would never walk free again, at least not for a very long time. Local leaders promised to implement new safety measures, better street lighting, more neighborhood patrols, and improved support for victims of stalking and domestic violence. Her friends organized a memorial scholarship in her name, helping other young women in Surrey chase their dreams like she once had. And at night, the vigils returned. But this time, they were filled not with fear, but with remembrance. The Surrey murder case left scars. For months after, residents said they still locked their doors twice, checked over their shoulders walking home, and flinched at unfamiliar footsteps behind them. Some moved away entirely, unable to bear the memories tied to their neighborhood. Mental health counselors reported a spike in trauma-related visits from people who had never even known the victim, yet felt shaken by what happened. And within the RCMP itself, the case triggered major reforms. The department created a dedicated domestic violence and stalking response unit, aiming to identify danger signs earlier before obsession turns deadly. Even years later, people in Surrey still speak of her, not as the victim, but by her name. They remember her laugh, her smile, her love of art, and her endless kindness. Her story became a cautionary tale and a call to action. What happened in Surrey was not random. It was not senseless. It was the tragic end of a chain of red flags, warning signs, and missed chances to intervene. Her death forced an entire city to confront uncomfortable truths. How easily obsession can masquerade as affection. How quickly love can turn to control. And how silence, the silence of neighbors, friends, even systems, can allow danger to grow unseen. In the end, the killer's attempt to erase his crime failed, because the people of Surrey refused to let her memory disappear. In the quiet city of Surrey, a light was stolen, but her story became brighter than the darkness that tried to consume it. Today, the man who killed her sits behind prison walls. and the community she loved is healing. Slowly, painfully, but together. If you've watched this far, thank you for honoring her story. Do you think the system did enough to protect her before it was too late? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to explore more stories like this, real, raw, and unforgettable, check out my next documentary on another shocking murder that happened just miles away from here. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because the only way to fight the darkness is to keep telling the stories that matter.